Florida State is on the cusp of being a dominant recruiting program again. There's one more category they need to do really well to make it happen, and I'm about to talk about it on Locked On Seminoles.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Today's show is going to talk about the big-time recruiting that Florida State is involved with and the key position to get them over the top to make them a national program on the recruiting scene and in the National College Football Playoffs. My name again is Brian Smith. Thank you very much for coming in and checking us out here at Locked On Seminoles. You can find us wherever you get your podcast for free and on YouTube. And today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. The position in question is defensive tackle, and we're talking about guys that are mostly physically developed out of high school. The chosen ones, if you will, meaning the elite kids in terms of size, athleticism, and just natural get after it. I'm going to be that dude on Saturday night. The teams that win national titles, and I'll go over the numbers here in a second, it's the number one predictor for which teams win titles is elite D-line recruiting, specifically, again, in the middle of the line. Why? Well, most likely, and this is just for me studying it for 20 years, it's because there are just so few of them. The teams that control the market at defensive tackle have a great chance to control the games when they matter most, top program against top program. You want facts? Let's go with this. Beginning in 2009 through this past season, we got 15 national champions. 12 of those teams come from this group: Bama, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, and Ohio State. Bama's 6 of them. I get it. Georgia won a couple. Clemson won a couple. But even the teams that were kind of thrown in there as well, 2010 Auburn, they had Cam Newton, sure, but they had 2 guys get drafted on the interior of the defensive line, a couple of junior college kids that were really good. Then you go and you look at a couple other opportunities, like this past year, Michigan, the national title game against Washington. Obviously, the Huskies had a tremendous offensive firepower that was as good or better than any team in the country. They couldn't run the ball consistently against Michigan's front. They still did good. I mean, it's Washington's offense, tremendous. But the difference was recruiting. Michigan had a 340-pound interior defensive lineman that will be a long-time NFL player. He was the difference in the football game. Defensive tackle recruiting out of high school is the number one predictor. Auburn had the one outlier by going the JUCO route and hitting multiple guys in one year. That's wild. But again, this is the outlier. You have to win at the trenches to do it. In Florida State's heyday, they absolutely did. There were so many times Florida State would be sitting with one commitment going into like December and January, when February used to be the original signing day. They'd be in with 4 or 5 guys on the D-line. They could hit 20%, and they'd still get 2 really good defensive tackles every single year. They just did. Bowden one time even said on signing day, even though we had like the top 3 class, we could have used another defensive lineman. And I'm thinking, okay, I get it, coach. You want more, but you had a top 3 class. His point is still well taken. If you dominate the market, all of the following things happen. You're going to get more sacks. You're going to lower the number of yards per carry for your opponent when they run the football. And here's the big one that I kind of learned just over time, especially during Bowden's era when the state of Florida was dominant. If he got the kid, that means Spurrier didn't. That means Miami didn't. That means Georgia didn't. That means Bama didn't. That means Notre Dame didn't, because those same schools still recruit the same players. So again, the 5 programs that have been dominating it: LSU, Bama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State over the last 15 years. And Florida State's kind of on the cusp of that again. The kids they got this past year, Florida State fans should be happy about. Denace White, that's a 320-pound man you can put in the middle. Probably going to need a year to redshirt and get better. That's cool, but he's massive. Jamari Flagg out of Booker T in Miami. That's a kid that plays really hard. He's played against top competition in the Miami Public League. He's 280 or so. He's going to be a good player. Going to need a year or two, but he's good. The intriguing guy for me, and I'm not sure how Florida State will use him, especially right off the bat, because I don't know what he'll come in at, is D.D. Holmes. He plays at Gonzaga in the D.C. area. That's a tradition-rich private school. I'd be surprised if he's listed at 250, but he was listed at that last year. I'm guessing he's 260 or more now. I don't know what spot he's going to play, but at the worst case scenario, D.D.'s going to be a kid that you can play inside at least periodically. So Florida State's trending in the right direction. No question. But the kids that I'm talking about that those 5 schools consistently got were the top 5 to 10 in the country. These kids are on the cusp of that, just going by rankings, but they weren't the elite kids. The player that I went to see Friday night, Florida State's going to get an official visit from, and in my opinion, the safest pick long-term, like NFL draft, the whole 9 yards, from the class of 2025 to be successful is Justice Terry. He plays at Manchester, Georgia, and he is a flat-out man-child, period. This is the kind of guy that Bobby Bowden would have went out and recruited himself. Not that his own staff wouldn't have been involved, but Bobby liked recruiting anyway, and this kid would have been right up his alley. Yes, sir, no, sir. Goes out of his way to get better even when he's dominant, like he's been one of the best players in the country since he was a sophomore in high school. And he's a kid that when he shakes your hand, he literally hurts my hand when I shake it. Literally. I don't know why the second time that I had a chance to shake his hand, I did. I shouldn't have. His hand engulfs my hand. It's insane. Justice is 6'5", 270, and runs like a deer. You cannot teach the natural size, athleticism, and girth. Florida State is nowhere near the top of the board for that kid, but he has no idea where he's going. I know Justice pretty well, and he told me this is going to drag out into the fall, but he's going to take some visits this summer, including the Noles. I'll talk about that in a second. This is the kind of bellwether, barometer, whatever way you want to put it, recruit that you have to get if you're going to consistently compete and play for national titles. Florida State has found ways to circumvent it for the most part over the last few years. But if you want to give yourself the best chance, you just need more high school players that are elite defensive linemen. This is one of the guys. I also have a few other kids to mention too, but let's talk a little bit about Justice again to put things in perspective. Can play strong side end, D tackle, nose guard, whatever, doesn't matter. His coach said he could even play some standing up right now in like a jack position. And after watching him Friday night, I have no doubts that he's right. He's the rarest of the rare. Okay. Every school in the country is after him. Georgia, Southern Cal, Florida State, Bama, Ohio State. Those are some of the schools. Auburn's in there as well. They're all going to get visits. If somehow Florida State gets this kid, it kind of changes your program because not only is he a great player, he's going to play right away. I mean, he's flat out going to play as a freshman. Goes to Georgia, he's going to play. But he also sets a trend. Florida State, it was expected in the 80s and 90s, they were going to get some of these kids. Early 2000s, whatnot, and even under Jimbo, some of these kind of players came. It hasn't been that case here recently. Florida State signed good defensive linemen, but their D-line recruiting is not up to snuff with those errors that I just discussed. It's just not. They're on the cusp of that again, and after this class they just had, which is pretty darn good, if you can get even one kid, it doesn't have to be Justice per se, but if you can get at least one guy that's upper echelon to go with what you had last year, then you can start the assembly line, and it's cool again to go play for Florida State. Here in just a second, I'm going to go over some of the other kids that I think they have a shot at, where some of them are going. I'm going to talk about some of the kids they missed out on last year, like what it would be if they just would have added one more guy. It's amazing what one recruit, just one, can do for your program. That's next here on Locked On Seminoles. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team, and it's faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a job but might be open for the perfect role. In a given month, 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So if you're not using LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate in 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are you watching Fox Sports and ESPN on your TV all the time? have to turn down the volume with all the shouting that's going on, make sure you make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for your everyday to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So again, just adding one more guy in any given class, it's like an elite defensive tackle, as the numbers show. 12 out of 15 of the last national champions are the schools that elite, not just good. The 250-pound kids and up at D-tackle, they're the schools that sign the most. I've studied this forever. It is flat out the number one predictor in recruiting on who's going to have the best teams. Big guys in the middle that everybody wants. Like the kids like Justice probably has 50 plus offers. Justice Terry. Great kid, by the way, and he deserves all the credit that he's been given. But if Florida State wants to take that step to truly be on par with Georgia, just roster for roster, not saying they can't beat them and all that, but to give yourself the best chance, not only do you add to your roster, you're probably going to take somebody away every now and then from Georgia if you get these kids. In this case, with Justice Terry, that's probably the case as well. Like Georgia, Bama, SC. I mean, these are programs you're going to end up playing in the playoffs. You're taking one away from them as well. Here are some of the kids and some of the uniqueness with D-tackle recruiting. I just looked this up before the show for the 2024 class. It's weird with a lot of schools that get kids from far away, this, that, and the other forever. And I don't know why exactly this is. As a general rule, defensive tackles do not go far from home. Home state or the state next to them, it's almost always that case. And since most of them, quite frankly, reside in the Deep South, Florida State obviously is in Florida. It's next to Georgia. It's next to Alabama. You've got a chance at a lot of these kids. But this past year is just more of the same, even if they weren't. Like David Sohn, he grew up 30 minutes from Norman, Oklahoma, signs with OU. Williams Winnerick, Kansas City kid, signs with Mizzou. LJ McCray, in-state. Florida State had a good chance at him, but he signed with Florida. Dominic McKinley grew up an hour from Baton Rouge, signed with LSU. The one outlier is Justin Scott from Chicago. He signed with Miami. Miami also got Armando Blunt from Miami. Edric Houston is an Atlanta kid. Ohio State got him, even though Alabama and Georgia and a bunch of schools wanted him. He wanted to play in a 4-3. They ran 3-4, so he went to Ohio State. Bryce Young, that's Bryant Young's son. That's an easy pick for Notre Dame out of Charlotte. Jeremiah Beeman's a local kid, Birmingham area, signed with Bama. Cam Franklin is a small school kid, Mississippi, signed with Ole Miss. Florida State missed on a couple of kids, and they didn't get Artavius Jones. That hurt. He's a Bluntstown kid, grew up 45 minutes away. He signed with Miami. But again, a lot of these kids are close. Last year didn't work out perfect, and they still got really good players. They're still not in a bad spot. But at the same time, now this is the year that you have a chance because not only, I mean, you don't know what Justice Terry, you're going to get him on campus. He's going to visit in June, but you have other kids too. My concern is Justice can't go to Georgia, and here's why. The second best defensive lineman by most services, and the one I use for this barometer here, is on 3. Take it for what it's worth. Elijah Griffin out of Savannah Christian, he is almost a lock to go to Georgia. If him and Terry go to Georgia, it is bad for college football. It just has to stop where Georgia's getting like 2 out of the top 5 D linemen every freaking year. It's insane. Maybe they won't, but right now, from everything I'm told, Elijah is extremely likely to end up at UGA. We'll see with Justice. He's a little more open. Isaiah Campbell out of Durham, Southern High School, is going to Clemson. Big-bodied kid, really good. Nate Marshall's 265, athletic kid, can play some edge. He's committed to Michigan, so he's staying local. DJ Sanders, a kid from the state of Texas. He's going to go to Texas or Texas A&M most likely. But then we get into a few kids that Florida State's involved with, and these are the ones they should be. Jalen Wiggins, right down the street, lives in Tallahassee, but he's committed to UF right now for whatever it's worth. He's going to visit Florida. He's going to visit Stanford. Florida State might visit Notre Dame. That's dependent. We'll see. You cannot lose him to Florida. That would be 2 years in a row. The top in-state guy you wanted or as close to you, whatever, because they got LJ McCray last year. Florida State needs to close that one out. Myron Charles. If I had to pick right now, I would say Myron ends up at Florida State. He's 280, 290. Big kid. He's very athletic. He's from Port Charlotte, down in the southwest part of the state. If you could get him to go with Wiggins could play D end or D tackle. Doesn't matter. He's that kind of freaky athlete. You'd be set for bear. And then there's the kid that this would be a coup. But this is the player that Bobby Bowden always found a way to get. And I don't know how he did it. He was the master of recruiting, the in-home visit, whatever you want to call it. There's a player named Kevin Wynn who lives maybe an hour, if that, due south of Athens, Georgia. Yes, that's where the University of Georgia is at. Again, that state is the most loaded D-line state in the country. 6'3", 320 pounds. He's going to visit Florida State. Again, somehow, some way, you have to win some of these battles. They came close last year. That can't happen again. Close doesn't do you anything when the games are played. Either the guy is or he is not on your roster. Kevin is a massive young man, and he's the kind of dude that can change your roster because him at nose guard, and you don't double team him on first down, it becomes second down and 11. He stuffs the center and the guard, your linebacker flows, and you're in a bad situation. It's second and long. That was Florida State back in the day. They had guys like him, Simon and different guys that they put in nose guard and D-tackle. They ate people up. It's the bottom line. Florida State has positioned themselves with a lot of really good visits, a lot of good players coming in. Myron's going to visit in June. Kevin's going to visit in June. Jalen Wiggins will visit in June. They've got Justice Terry visit in June. Can they pull it in and get it done? That's the question. To finalize the show, I'm going to talk a little bit about last year's stats, and then I want you to kind of think about the following with all of these. I wasn't going to ask it individually, but I'm just going to do it now. Florida State's defense last year was legit. That's not in question. But think about if you would have taken one of the players that I just talked about and put it from 3 years ago, one of these five-star kids that's elite, just adding another tool to the package that you can get in there, a pass rusher, whatever you want. If you want to say edge too, that's fine. It's not like Florida State was lacking edge guys last year with what they had. But if you'd have added one more D tackle that could push the pocket, just one more guy in the rotation, where would they have been? Because they ended up with 46 sacks, etc. So that's what I want you to think about, how one more player may have been a difference in a game, may have been a difference in an opportunity for this next season because maybe he was a freshman or a sophomore, and then he'd learn from guys, obviously, like Verse. That what guy could you think of in terms of his trajectory to learn from? If you add guys like that at least every other year, if not every year, that's a top 100 D tackle, where would Florida State have been? So that's what we're going to talk about next on Locked On Seminoles. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to get on the spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So again, last year, Florida State's defense was fun to watch. I think we can all agree on that. It's not a secret. And they found ways to mix and match players, some through development, quite a few through portal, obviously Verse. Patrick Payton was a developmental guy out of Miami, very athletic, but he was a smaller, thin guy at edge. Defensive tackle, they rotated some guys, and they also used the portal there too. Bottom line, they develop really well at Florida State. That's also not in question. But if you just add one more guy, all the coaching in the world can do so much good, but every coach will tell you it's still recruiting that's going to win the day. Adding one guy is good for you, and it takes away from the others. So here are a few of the numbers to kind of think about from last year, just some stats. They're fourth in the nation at 46 sacks. Passing defense was 11th in the nation, even though teams were behind all the time having to throw. The passing defensive stat might be more impressive to me, take it for what it's worth, than the actual sacks. And 46 is a lot. 179.7, because teams had to throw the ball because the Noles could score. I mean, running, passing, impromptu plays, whatever it was on offense, Florida State could put the ball in the end zone. The thing that's interesting to me, though, even though the passing numbers were like that, you had to hit big plays against the Noles. Sometimes their DBs would get beaten at 50-50 or whatever. The one stat that I was surprised by, just kind of digging through a bunch of numbers, Florida State ended up with 59 plays they allowed of 20 or more yards. That's not that great, to be honest, for a defense as good as they were. Now, they were aggressive, and they got caught with their pants down here and there, but sometimes it was the game's over, kind of lost interest. I get it. But again, if you have more defensive tackle talent, that number is going to be lower. You're going to be in more second 8, second 9, second 11s, whatever. You can't get around it. It's just straightforward. You have to find ways to sign the elite defensive tackles. Doesn't matter which school you are or which region of the country you're in. And Florida State is at a major advantage. This year, they're coming off the great season from 2023. They've already done all their due diligence, done a great job. No doubt about it. They have visits lined up, and they might have some other kids they're working on that I don't even know about, that they're trying to flip somebody else, etc. And finally, this is a team that kind of knows their barometer, how things work, the coaching staff, what we can develop. They should pretty much just know what they want. And it's probably why they got so many visits lined up so early with all these kids that I just mentioned a minute ago. They're really good. They know exactly what they're trying to do with the defense. They got their message out. Their recruiting staff's done a good job. There's really no reason for it. So at the end of this cycle, and I know it's not until December, at least one of the elite defensive tackles needs to end up in Tallahassee. Don't know which one it is. That's not the prudent point. A top 100, 250-plus pound kid needs to sign with the Noles. And to be honest, that should be Florida State's objective each and every recruiting cycle. Why not? They're in Florida, tradition-rich. You've got one of the most tradition-rich defensive line coaches in the history of college football on your staff who was a player at Florida State, and it's a team coming off a 13-0 start to last year. It's a pretty easy sell to me. So that's going to be one of the things that I harp on between now and signing day, especially now that I dug into it, really looked at it. Florida State's in a position to have a special class in general to get there and to win games ultimately, which is what recruiting is about. It's still defensive tackle. You'll get quarterbacks and all that, and that's great. But if you don't get the defensive tackles, you're probably not going to beat the Georgias and Bamas of the world in the college football playoff all that often. The numbers bear it out. Just to reiterate, 12 of the last 15 national titles are the 5 best teams at recruiting defensive tackles: LSU, Bama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State. It's just the way it is. So I want you to think about that. We're going to talk a little more recruiting this week and kind of break down some of the more of the important official visits, not only for the Noles, but some of the teams they're competing with, like who's doing well, who's not, and why it's important. Because I meant to get to it today, and I'll just mention it and get to it more tomorrow. But like LSU is in a horrific spot for this season. I'm sure you've probably seen the clips of Brian Kelly. They had some misses, and it's not a great year in state for them with recruiting. And on top of it, and they didn't go out and get the needs taken care of at defensive tackle in the portal. LSU is going to end up missing the playoff or barely making it and not getting anything done because they don't have enough talent up front. With Florida State recruiting like they are, they're going to avoid that situation to even be in it moving forward. That's the best situation they can be in. Now, I know they won on the portal for the last few years. Not having to rely on it's a bonus. It's where you want to be. And then when you take a guy from the portal, it's just a cherry on top, not somebody that you got to have. Because if you miss, you end up in the spot that LSU is going to be in. And I don't think they'll be in the SEC this year. They probably won't have a top 8 or 9 defense. That should never be the case at LSU, but they're in a bad spot. Both their D tackles left early, and they got kind of caught in a really awkward position. So I'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow here on Locked On Seminoles. Thank you once again for making this your first listen each and every day. Come back and check us out again on Tuesday. This is Brian Smith. Everybody have a good one.